All right, welcome everybody. My name is Matt Hardy. I'm the Senior Program Director for Planning and Performance Management here at AASHTO. Welcome to today's webinar on resilience and the IIJA. As some logistics, please don't forget to mute yourself. I'm not sure why I got to change my settings, I guess, so people come in muted. Today's webinar is sort of a follow-on from the one that we did back in December, which was the TAMP webinar, or sorry, the TAM webinar series, where we were talking about, I'm trying to bring up my notes, sorry. We were talking about the IIJA and some of the implementation issues surrounding that from the asset management perspective. And what we found out is that there was this big conversation about risk and resilience within the IIJA. So what we decided to do was to do more of a deep dive into that, that topic for this one today. So that's going to be what we talk about. I want to thank Steve Gay from FHWA, who's our partner in these webinar series. We can't do it without him. We have a great portal, the TPM Portal. If you go to tpm-portal.com, you can go there. You can download recordings of all our previous webinars, as well as the content for them, slides, and all that good stuff. So please go to tpm-portal.com. One logistical thing that I want to talk about, I'm going to launch a poll here. So a big part of today is breakout rooms, and we have 135 people on. We want to make sure that we have enough rooms so that we can have a nice, smaller scale discussion. So if you could sort of just indicate which room you think you're going to be going into, I would appreciate it. That way we can make sure that we have enough people. Facilitators and everything. So the first breakout was on TAMP and resiliency, about how to include resilience topics within your TAMP. The second one is on the PROTECT program specifically within the IIJA. The third one is on tools and techniques that is needed to sort of better understand risk and resilience. And the last one is on the centers of excellence that are indicated within the asset management plan. And of course, it's Murphy's Law that whenever I start talking, the home phone is going to ring. So I apologize for that. All right, I'll keep that poll up. If you go to the next slide, Lori. Go to the next one for the agenda. So today we're going to do a little bit of introductory remarks. I'm going to turn it over to my friend Steve, who's going to give some update from FHWA. And then we're going to hear from Ed Sniffen, who's the director at the Hawaii DOT. I forgot to mention that this is we're trying to sort of partner with two AASHTO committees today. One is our subcommittee on risk management, which is chaired by Jane Wallace. And the second one is the Committee on Transportation System Security and Resilience, which is chaired by Ed Sniffen. So Ed's going to give some perspective about resilience and everything, and IIJA from the Hawaii DOT point of view. And then Melissa Savage, my colleague here at AASHTO, will talk about some of the current work and current activities going on related to resilience. And then we'll go into our breakout group discussions. So that's the general agenda for today. If you have any questions, you can use the chat feature. And then we'll come back and we'll do breakout. We are going to do breakout group report outs from the breakout groups and kind of what was heard. This will be sort of high level, quick little discussions, and we'll do a wrap up and next steps. The schedule is a little bit fluid, so please bear with us as we kind of get through this. We do want to spend as much time as possible for those breakout groups. So if things are going really well within the breakout groups, we're going to keep on going with those, and maybe have a little bit less time for the report outs and that sort of thing. So if you have any questions or anything, please put those in the chat. We'll try to help you as best we can. And again, we are using the breakout groups. We're using the breakout room functionality within Zoom. So if you don't know how to use that, stick around. We'll be opening up the breakout rooms, after the speaking, but we'll have people here to help you get to whichever breakout room you want to go to. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve Gay from the FHWA for some remarks from him. All yours, Steve.
Thank you, Matt. And like always, I think Federal Highway and AASHTO working together with these webinars is important, and we appreciate it. And I'm excited to participate on this topic of dealing with resiliency. With regard to asset management plans, the TAMPs need to address this issue. The bipartisan infrastructure law requires consideration of extreme weather and resilience as part of the life cycle cost and risk management analysis within the state DOT TAMP. And I know I've received questions, well, what does resilience mean? And resilience in the law says, with respect to a project, where I say project here, I'll just play it up to the network level. When you're talking about an asset management plan, it means a project with the ability to anticipate, prepare for, or adapt to conditions, or withstand, respond to, or recover rapidly from disruptions, including the ability to resist hazards or withstand impacts from weather events and natural hazards, or reduce the magnitude or duration of impacts of a disruptive weather event or natural disaster on a project. And to have an absorptive capacity, adaptive capacity, and recoverability to decrease project vulnerability to weather events or other natural hazards. So it's expected that the TAMPs that are being developed will all be addressing this in the life cycle planning and risk analysis. As you've heard me say in the past, I believe what's already in the regulation you've seen, I think we have much of the same language in there. I think this clarifies it a bit. You know, an item that I would just say is, I know I've been in different venues where people say it's when we're developing investment strategies in a TAMP, why am I going to put funding towards something that may happen versus putting down blacktop? Now, I'll say from where I sit, it seems like there's an awful lot of what may be happening that already is happening. I'll leave it at that. And with that, I'll pass it to Ed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. I really appreciate the Federal Highway and AASHTO relationship. Without that partnership, none of this is possible. Not this bill, not this discussion, not these opportunities that are coming up. Hello, everybody. I'm Ed Sniffen from the Hawaii Department of Transportation, and I also chair the CTSSR, the Committee on Transportation System Security and Resilience for AASHTO. Absolutely honored to provide the state's perspective as you prepare to participate in this roundtable discussion this afternoon. The CTSSR is made up of amazing planning, project delivery operations, and emergency management leaders from the AASHTO states. They recommend a holistic view of resilience. Really, we're looking at making sure that resilience is baked into everything the DOT does, that cycle of life that everything we do, from planning to design to construction to maintenance and emergency management and response. We also advocate for ensuring that lessons learned from each of the emergencies that you guys run through get included into the cycle of life to ensure that every time we touch a project, the system gets better and better and more resilient. CTSSR sees that leadership plays a tremendous role in resilience, and Steve just spoke to it. We are all up against legislators, community members who say, I understand this stuff that's going to happen 50 years from now, but today my road has potholes in it. Today I'm stuck in traffic. Deal with that first. Making sure that leadership speaks to this issue, resilience, making sure it speaks to the importance and its commitment to it every day in every conversation to ensure that all community members, all DOT employees, all of our policymakers and legislators understand its importance and our commitment to it. I mean, it's got to be like safety. It's got to be top of mind without even saying it. I mean, that's where resilience needs to be in order for us to be successful, especially with the IIJA that's coming through. We're going to have to collaborate with a lot more agencies that we didn't partner with in the past. We're going to make sure that we tie these partnerships together so we're building a resilient state for our communities rather than just the DOT systems. The states all understand the importance of all of this, but mainly about risk. When we start looking at how we speak to this, we have to talk about that risk component as we go forward. So CTSSR has worked closely with the AASHTO experts on risk, the AASHTO Committee on Performance-Based Management and the Subcommittee on Risk Management. We recognize that assessing system risk and vulnerabilities is essential. And we focused many of our joint meetings and our peer exchanges learning about how other states across the DOTs and across the country are conducting these kinds of assessments. I know I speak for my peers when I say that we're super excited about the IIJA funding and what the opportunities that are coming up for it. Not only in the program on the program funding side, but also with the discretionary grants that are available to us. And I'm super excited to hear what we're going to talk about today. In Hawaii, we tried to set ourselves up to make sure that we're ready for this funding, ready for this opportunity. We've conducted our vulnerability assessments. We've set up our climate adaptation action plan to make sure we're inward looking and change there first while we're adjusting and addressing concerns with the public. Our TAMP is set up to ensure that there's robust analysis on the risks related to asset management. So we know we spend a lot of time in it, and I think we're in pretty good condition to make sure we're ready for this. We looked at the risks based on hazards and financial, organization and strategic impacts, and we assessed them based on all their impacts to our organization, to our system, to our programs, to our projects, and our communities. But we still got to get to the next level. We still got to reassess our system, see how resilient it actually is, in the light of the new data that keeps coming in, the better data that keeps coming in, to make sure that we can even make better decisions as we go forward on investing our local, state, and federal funding to address this resilience issue in our systems. We need to tie our plans in to the rest of the state and county agencies to ensure we're, again, looking at a resilient Hawaii versus just a resilient DOT system. We're looking at adapting our existing processes to ensure that we stay flexible to both minor and major adaptations. We use greener construction materials, so we're not part of the problem as we go forward. We invest in technologies that are more efficient in data gathering efforts. Build a knowledge base of adaptive design measures to make sure that we can just share it out with the rest of the state and county agencies, so we're all working off of the same platforms. We're piloting as many times as we can, as often as we can, to ensure that we default towards action versus just conversation. And of course, we're building our Build Back Better strategies and our retreat strategies to ensure that we have the plans ready when gluts of funding become available. That's why we're super excited to talk about IIJA today. I'm just excited to hear what comes from the rest of you on how you're preparing, what you're doing in your states, and what your needs are as we go forward from a resource perspective, money, time, experience, all those things, so we can all share together. Excited to hear from you, and I look forward to the conversations. Thank you so much.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So Melissa Savage with AASHTO, and I'm very fortunate to work with Ed as I'm the staff liaison to the Committee on Transportation System Security and Resilience. And as he just mentioned, certainly one of the things that we've focused a lot on over the last few years is that idea about data-driven decisions when we're making investments in this area. So today I'm going to run through a few things really quickly for you to prep us for the breakout conversation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a TRB Consensus Study that was recently completed, and then I'll also talk a little bit about the resilience portions of the IIJA. So next slide. So the TRB Consensus Study, again, was $1 million that TRB used to study and kind of take a look at what kinds of metrics are available for states looking at resilience related to all types of disasters. And the findings basically stated that there was no single metric or value available at this time, but there is a need for one. And so the authors developed a framework, which I'll talk about in a second, and then also came up with 5 recommendations. So next slide. So what you see here is kind of an input output. And again, at the end of the day, what we're looking for is this idea of the data-driven decision making. That's hard to say, but kind of taking in all the inputs about criticality, vulnerability, and then really coming up with ways for states to make decisions about what makes most sense in terms of investments to improve resilience in the system. So this is the framework that they developed through the consensus study. Next slide. So the first recommendation was one that recommended that Congress should consider a requirement for these kinds of metrics or assessments to be made when looking at resilience to natural hazards. And then looking at ways that the assessments could be integrated into environmental impact assessments or other kinds of project evaluation like benefit cost analysis. And then that this level of analytical effort shouldn't necessarily, or it should be reasonably related to the costs of the project that was under consideration. Next slide. The second recommendation is that the Secretary's office should promote the use of a benefit cost analysis for project justification, and using that analytic framework that we talked about just a second ago, and looking at the benefits from adding resilience to different projects and kind of mitigating its future losses. The next slide. And then recommendation number 3 was that the Secretary's office should provide guidance to the modal administrations on development and use of this kind of analytic method and tool for estimating resilience benefits. Next slide. And recommendation 4, again, asking Congress to direct and resource properly the Secretary's office to conduct a study and looking at the kinds of data that is needed to do this kind of analysis, and making sure that to address any kinds of data gaps, and just making sure that this will that the data is there, to use that framework appropriately. Next slide. And then finally, the 5th recommendation was around designing pilots that could be used to demonstrate the applicability of these kinds of tools for estimating resilience benefits. And so those are the 5 recommendations in the framework. And I know I went through those really quickly, but we, again, wanted to leave as much time as possible for the breakout group discussion. So on the next slide, I will kind of run through what we see in IIJA as it pertains to resilience. Certainly, there are some definitional additions in the law. You see that in number 1. Number 2, there's adding a new purpose element to increasing resilience of the NHS to mitigate against the cost of natural disaster damages. Matt kind of talked about this piece also, that the TAMP must now include an analysis taking into consideration extreme weather and resilience. And then the PROTECT program, which is a new formula and grant funded program, which basically will allow transportation agencies to take a look at resilience and really incorporate that. There is also an encouragement to establish a resilience improvement plan, and then also the Resilience Centers of Excellence. And then section 25007, which is again more around this risk and system resilience idea, which is quantifying the risk in order to make better decisions. And I think there are a little bit more detail on the next slide about that one, I believe. Yeah, there you can kind of see some of the specifics from that section. And I think that might be my last slide. And in that case, I think I'm turning it back to Matt for information about the breakouts.
Yes. So thanks, Melissa, for that. So that was just to give you sort of a flavor of what was of what's in the IIJA. And believe it or not, we're going to focus our breakouts on the 4 general areas that we saw within within the IIJA. So we have 4 topics. We have 8 breakouts, and we did some on-the-fly changing. So we'll have 3 breakout rooms available to talk about TAMP and the resiliency requirements. We'll have 2 to talk about the PROTECT program, 2 to talk about tools and techniques, and then 1 to talk about the Resilience and Adaptation Centers of Excellence. So please, so that was based upon the polling that we did. Please select a group. If you see one of them is getting a lot of people in there, please go to a different one, just to sort of level things out. We're trying to talk about sort of, we have 3 on TAMP and resiliency. We're going to talk about the same topics in all 3 of those. They'll just be sort of different people. And if you want to go back and forth, that's perfectly fine too. You can leave a breakout, go back to a breakout, all that kind of stuff. So please do a self-selection. And I think we're going to open up the breakout room. So please go to whichever one you want to. We have facilitators and we have moderators for all of them. There was a question about what will be discussed in tools and techniques. So we don't have any set, we have some questions, but they're more generic questions. So it's really about, what the people kind of want to talk about. So for tools and techniques, it's sort of about what do you believe are needed for states and locals and everybody to kind of understand risk and resilience as it pertains to the IIJA. So I think that was it. I see people are going to them now, which is great. All right, are we all back? I think we're all back. All right, so this is.
Looks like it, yep.
Okay, there's a comment here. All right, use the Google Doc. All right. So thanks everybody. I hope that was, so we're not done yet or anything. We're gonna have some report outs and kind of further discussion as best we can up until about 3:30. So we're gonna go through report outs from each of the breakouts. We'll start with group 1A with, I guess, Matt Harbrick was facilitating that one. So I don't know, keep it to like 5 minutes or less. I think that should be okay. Or maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes anyways. Try to summarize it quickly and then we'll go from there. So Matt, you want to start off or group 1A?
I'd be happy to. Yeah, we had a great group, about 30 people in the breakout room, so a pretty large group. A lot of folks representing state agencies, but also federal MPOs, others in the room as well, and definitely appreciated the conversation. We did spend quite a bit of time kind of talking about various issues related to the definitions. We were fortunate to have Steve Gay join us in our breakout room, and so he did reiterate the fact that federal highway sort of has a definition, but we talked about the fact that in some ways definitions may have to be sort of situational. What might make sense for a definition for Iowa might not necessarily make sense for Texas or for Maryland, or it just depends on the various issues that your state or your agency, your area may be needing to address in particular. So yeah, sorry, Elizabeth, yeah, let me mention that. The first topic was related to the TAMPs and resiliency. So how are we going to be looking at incorporating resilience into our transportation asset management plans, which are the DOT documents that we use to document our processes that are then certified by Federal Highway. So for those that maybe aren't familiar with that process, but those of us at the DOTs, many of us have been deep in that for the last 5 years, and kind of it's old hat, but definitely thinking about how, as we're describing our asset management processes in the document, in the Transportation Asset Management Plan, or the TAMP, then how does resilience become incorporated into that? Of course, we do have some start at that already with the requirements that were put forward under Part 667 last time, from the FAST Act and MAP 21, even before that, talking about areas that have seen repeated damage due to events. Then this, IIJA kind of builds upon that. And so, I think that this idea, first of all, that we can maybe take that federal highway definition, maybe build on it. There's also, I think, quite a few states who have already started really wrestling with this idea of resilience, and maybe there's a way that we can just do more conversations. It's not too dissimilar from this about, what is it that we're seeing, and how are we able to potentially share what we're using as definitions. I think one of the areas that we really need to think about is going beyond just the sort of natural disasters that we tend to be focused on, thinking, beyond that into other kinds of events that could happen, or maybe either other kinds of threats that we might have to face. For example, now one of the things that's always resonated with me, I was able to attend a peer exchange a number of years ago with one of the transit operator CEOs, who talked about the fact that the resilience issue that she was most concerned about was actually their app that people were using to book trips. There were many days when the trains wouldn't run, or they'd have different problems on their system. But the day that her phone would ring the most was the day that the app stopped working right, and people didn't know how to plan their trips. And so this idea of like information about the system and how things are flowing, I think, is really crucial for us to kind of keep in mind. Is how do people know how they're going to access the system and make the trips that they want to be able to make. We talked a little bit about how we can advance the area. Maybe one thing would be
Hey,
thinking
Matt,
about,
we gotta
Yeah.
we gotta wrap it up. Yeah, we got 8 to go through.
yeah. All right. I'll tell you what. I don't want to steal everyone else's thunder, so I'll wrap it up and pass it over to the next group, to Todd, I think, right?
It is. Thanks. And it sounds like some similar discussions, some slightly different. Our mixture was a mixture of state, fed, local. I want to brag. We had one non-transpo person in there. We had someone from kind of water infrastructure. So it was a great discussion, added stuff. And I'm going to hit on some things that were different than what Matt talked about, so I don't repeat the same things. We had some discussion in the definitional part about, needing to incorporate cultural resiliency. One individual mentioned cultural resiliency may be equating to workforce resiliency in that particular area. Very different from pavement bridge, but you need that cultural resiliency to be able to care for those mainline areas. Cybersecurity was another area that kind of was brought about. Several folks talked about the different risk when we talk about project level risk, enterprise level risk, network level risk. Resiliency takes on a very similar approach to that there's project level resiliency, network, and then enterprise level resiliency. Several folks in our group talked about connecting it to the project selection criteria, really the key in the ticket there. We talk about this all day long. We can put it in our risk matrices. We can put it in our life cycle management chapter, but until it really hits the project selection criteria, that's where you're going to kind of make your bang for your buck in that particular area. But one thing we've noticed in Washington is those dollars go high really fast with regard to resiliency, and what's the benefit analysis for that. I want to tout Massachusetts brought up, they do have a website, and correct me if I'm wrong if I say it wrong, but it's RMAT, Resiliency for Massachusetts, and it's supposedly not just the DOT, but everything in one location. There was a website there. And for my friend here over in Eastern Washington, we you need one size fits all is not the best approach. We have geographically diverse state, like most other states, right? We have a foot of snow on the ground. Western Washington has just wet ground, basically. Need to know that. And the last thing PennDOT recognized is the maturity in all the plans. Some of the plans, even for pavement and bridge, are less mature than other states. Some plans within state DOTs. So we have to acknowledge that as well. Matt, I hope I fit within the time frame.
All right. I think
Perfect. Oh,
1C, right?
yep.
Okay, so I'll be quick. So in our group, we were majority state DOT folks and one federal highway division person. And when we talked about the definition of resilience, I would say the majority of the group had not defined it. They didn't have a set definition, but some were working on it. Others said they practiced it, but had not specifically defined it. So the question of what is your definition of resilience is not one that was easy to answer, other than to point to examples of how they were building resiliency. And then people talked about how can you, advance resiliency, both from the national level as well as at the agency level. And CDOT shared that they have a new resiliency program and have done some pilot work, but they haven't implemented it. But it looked like something that could be shared with others once they have some traction with implementation. People wanted more workshops and trainings on how to incorporate resiliency better into the TAMP. And they also wanted to share definitions of resilience across agencies better, so that you were learning from each other's. And then New Jersey mentioned that they really thought working with the regional agencies and other transportation type agencies within their region is something that is needed to advance resiliency, since it doesn't end with a boundary that's set by geography. And then the other thing I just wanted to share was we had enough time to talk about what questions do these agencies have to share with a broader group. And I would say thematically, most of it came down to clearer set of expectations. One person said, they like getting an A+, and they would like to know how to get the A+ ahead of the time, not after the fact, because that it would make their lives easier and clearer on what they needed to do. And so various aspects of that, of expectation setting and clarity of what needs to be done. So moving on to group 2A with Ed and Melissa.
Hi, Ed had to drop off, but I'm going to do my best. So our group was mostly state DOTs, and we had someone from an MPO as well. And we talked a lot about kind of what makes up a plan. Is it, there are lots of plans out there and they can be aspirational in a sense. And so, how do we tie the plans to or create them in a way that are actually implementable? So we talked a lot about what a good plan looks like, setting out goals, and then getting to some of what we were talking about earlier when we kicked off the breakouts was measures, and what are the outcomes that you're looking for. So we heard a lot. We went around the virtual room to hear what some of the states are doing and how they're addressing resiliency. And what we know, just in terms of working with the states over the last several years, is that, several of the states are already, moving in the direction of conducting criticality and vulnerability assessments and building plans around those. There was some discussion about what this resilience improvement plan, what that will be, what it will look like, what will be the requirements. Will it be project specific, like a list of projects, or will it be more kind of policy driven? So we had a lot of great conversations and learned a lot about what some of the states are doing. And I know we have, what do you got, 4 more of these to go through. So I'll stop talking, but I would say, since Ed had to drop off, if any of the folks that were in my group, if I forgot anything, please put it in the chat.
And Matt, I believe you are up next.
Yes, my notes are going all over the place. I was actually typing up my notes a little bit. All right, so I was group 2B. We also talked about the Protect program. And what I took away from the conversation, so we were primarily state DOTs. We had somebody from an MPO, and then we also had a consultant, and then a couple people from FHWA to kind of listen in. So 4 sort of major themes that we kind of talked about. The first one is, as Melissa said, if you're a part of the group and I'm mischaracterizing something or whatever, please put it in the chat. The first theme is, what are the states doing right now that is resilience planning, but it's not labeled as such? So a lot of the states that we're on, that were talkative, were said, we have, as part of our statewide plan, an appendix that talks about resilience, or we're doing this sort of just, it's kind of embedded in our planning process in some way right now, the documents, the process, we have the tools. So we are doing this in some way. How are we going to have to sort of document this, for as part of this new formula program? The second area, there were questions and just discussions about what kind of analysis, level of detail and stuff is going to be required for the Protect program or for the grants, that sort of thing. So level of detail, what type of tools, what are those data needs going to be? Was brought up a couple times about using current data, but then having to project out 25, 30, 40 years, what's going to happen, and kind of some concerns about that. Also, when to do the analysis within the project life cycle, because you might not have flexibility. The more and more you make decisions about projects and you go through the alternatives analysis or whatever, and you get to NEPA, when do you start doing the resilience risk analysis so that you have options to, I guess, fund different aspects of that project from for resilience or risk improvements. The third one was we talked about how to absorb all this new funding into the existing program, that there's going to be sort of short term if we get the money starting February 19th. How do we address that versus something that's going to be sort of evolved over time, that what we do in the next 18 months or 2 years might be very different from a more robust program that gets developed over the next 2 years that we start doing 3 or 4 years from now. How does that fit within this administration? Sometimes administrations work on 4-year cycles, that sort of thing. So how does all that kind of jive with each other? And then the last one that I kind of posed a question about, but there was some good discussion, was right now the focus was on sort of environment and climate type resilience, but what about technology as well? Can that be included in this? Should it be included? And I think there was a agreement that it's just it's the same process and everything can be used for that technological risk and resilience analysis. It's just probably different systems, different data, and some of the projects that you would use to improve resilience to environmental effects might also improve the technological resilience as well in some way. So I hope I characterized that okay, but that's kind of what we talked about.
Moving on then to tools and techniques, group 3A, Jean Wallace.
Hey, good afternoon. So we had about 20 people in our breakout session, really great geographic distribution and mostly state DOTs, but we also had some federal highways folks, pavement engineers, and some MPO folks. And so we really started by looking at, what does the language of the law say? And, the section 25007 requires the secretary to develop a process for quantifying annual risk in order to increase system resilience regarding surface transportation. And we gave that a little bit of thought. And then we looked at, had more of a discussion on just general what's needed for tools and techniques, and maybe some shared some information from what some organizations are doing. So regarding what's needed is this acknowledgement, and I think it's been, well, I know it's been acknowledged in some of the other groups, that whatever we do has to be adaptable and scalable to assets in various regions of the country, and even within regions of your state DOT where the geology might be quite different. It has to take into account the hazards and strengths of assets based on construction materials, based on the types of threats, obviously. So that's a tall order to be that adaptable and scalable across so many different factors. Some acknowledgements up front about from some state DOTs where workforce is a huge challenge right now. A lot of states don't have the staff to be able to do a lot of the lifting that's required to just get a basic understanding of what asset conditions we currently have, and beyond just pavement and bridge. And so some states are contracting that work out, but it's still a big lift just to get, like I said, a thorough understanding of what all of the assets are, where they are, and what the condition is. We definitely need additional guidance from FHWA, and we need some expertise. We need training to really understand what it is that we're supposed to be doing and to use tools most effectively and efficiently. One example that was given was that agency developed a flooding risk tool, and now they're trying to expand that to local agencies, but the locals are saying, yeah, this isn't really working for us, isn't represent the reality of what we're seeing. So, one size does not fit all, I think was already discussed, and that's bearing out in other areas too. real quick, we talked about resiliency in terms of methodology. And it's in one state DOT, they acknowledged that when they started looking into this further, it got to be pretty controversial to come up with a methodology due to the lack of data, and it kind of kicks into a political realm as well. Fortunately, we had somebody from Colorado DOT talking about the various the work they've done on I-70 and their efforts to expand that statewide, the challenges associated with that regarding data availability. But it was really helpful. Dashel from CDOT shared the web link to Colorado's resiliency website. So that will be in our notes. And then there were some questions about, you know, how siloed we are often in our areas where we might be just looking at pavements or bridges or slopes or whatever. And how do we make sure that we do that cross asset comparison? And we talked a little bit about enterprise asset management systems being very useful for this work. And it's really important to, we had a further discussion on the importance of changing mindset and culture to develop mitigation designs beyond just what's might be the most cheapest capital cost, to look at the overall total cost of ownership, including cost to repair due to resiliency events. And finally, we talked a little bit about, let's see, maybe I'll just wrap it up there, but I think one final comment is that even having all this resiliency information is taking that and then moving it into your TAMP is still kind of a different step for some agencies too that needs to be taken into account. It's it doesn't necessarily happen all in one neat package. It's kind of first you have to do a real concentrated effort on getting the resiliency information and the risk assessment effort, and then there's a heavy lift to then put that into your asset management planning too. So just acknowledge that there is a lot of effort behind just getting meeting what's in the law. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Jean. We can go on to William Johnson, 3B, tools and tech, the other tools and techniques.
Hey, how's it going? I'll try to cover the things that Jean did not discuss. We had very brief discussion on what the requirements were under section 25007. More of a check-in on, hey, what's your current capability? In our group, we had a good mix between federal staff, DOTs, and we actually have one region planning commission member within our group. For the most part, there was recognition that different states are approaching resilience in different ways with different maturity levels. There's some that naturally coastal, you're focused on sea level rise, while others, Utah, Colorado, we're focused on other things such as fire. Recognition that wildlife is also a consideration for some of us. When it comes to the tools and techniques, I did add some things that were implied within the group but weren't specifically discussed. One of those in terms of tools and techniques is DOTs could really use some guidance on the resilience improvement plan. The plan being both a product and a tool, the guidance being more of, hey, what do we need to actually put in this thing? Knowing that, you know, it's a strategy, how we plan to expend funds and how we plan to address resilience. And that, you know, it'd be nice to know what we need to include in there so we can think about what those minimum things are, but really more so we can begin to align it with what's important within our states or agencies. Associated with that is really, you know, there hasn't been explicitly anything that says BC analysis is required for the discretionary grant programs. But I think that most people have just, you know, come to accept that BC analysis will be required for the discretionary grant programs. But in terms of doing the benefit cost analysis for those, what are the good practices? Do those exist? Are there some place easy for us to get to? Next one is knowledge transfer. So we've talked in other webinars about, is there a single repository for tools and analysis methodologies? Like, how do I calculate or quantify risk and resilience? Are there process? What are the things that could give state DOTs a head start? I will point back to the TPM portal, which contains all areas, performance management, asset management, risk management, as potential options for those portals. But really, it is more so a call out to those who have a good tool, who have a good process methodology documentation, to make sure those things are put there, communicated. If anything, you'll get feedback, good, poor, or otherwise. But more so, it's to share that knowledge. The next thing in terms of tools and techniques, this is more on the technique side, is define what you're talking about. And the definition of what you're talking about in terms of resilience, we also had a discussion on, are we talking about staff in intra-agency resilience? Are we talking about infrastructure resilience? Are we talking about community resilience? Are we talking about things such as supply chain resilience? Definitely is good practices, process, and how to do that are needed. Then there's more common things such as, what are the performance measures? What are the authoritative data sources? In terms of, again, defining what you're talking about. Modal resilience. How do we include modal resilience as it interacts with infrastructure resilience? And then, of course, delineating all those good practices between what you experience amongst the geographic differences across the nation, sea level rise, avalanche, snow, fire, post-fire debris flow, definitely community resilience, flooding, you have to put up there, and understanding what tools, techniques, data are available for those. Last, I'll put here is policy or federal requirement. Is someone had mentioned, our national design standards period should be looked at so that it's given a requirement to design for risk management, not probabilities. Difference there is, if you're designing for probability, well, let's say you're designing a bridge or culvert for a 500-year flood event versus looking at the consequences of losing that asset, which would be the risk management piece, such as, if you lose this bridge, what does it mean for the network and those affected by the loss of the bridge? And that, maybe we need to look at methodologies for how we include that within the design process. I'm going to talk, I know we're stop talking, I know we're short on time.
All right, thanks, William. And then last, but definitely not least, Patrick Cowley. You talk about the Adaptation Center, the Resilience and Adaptation Center of Excellence breakout, if you're still with us.
I will speak fast so we
Excellent.
can get this done in a minute. So what we lacked in number, we made up for in quality. We had 5 attendees at any time. We had a university, we had US DOT, a couple of state DOTs, and one from the Seattle DOT. And Emily, it was great to have you there. In general, what we found, there were 2 main questions. What is the purpose of the Centers of Excellence, and how can they maximize the value of the IIJA? And we talked about, we need to know about how to do, how these Centers of Excellence would help with outreach and technical capacity building, like any other technical help that we get, like the ones that we get with FHWA. Specifically, there were questions on how to apply for the grant, be able to provide us with information on how to actually get into the system of the grants with project eligibility, what goes into a resilience improvement plan, that they would have expertise in all aspects of transportation beyond highways, right? It would be transit and ferries and whatever else our DOTs may be responsible for. Interestingly, we talked about a regional analysis so that we could build a network of peers that this Center of Excellence may reach out to other areas that would be affected by these natural disasters, and how that community could then help to build resilience, not just within their agency. And then we talked about equity and restorative justice and how that might play into some of our selections and of projects, and what grants would be eligible for that type. And then what is the timeline for selecting these? What are the criteria? And so because they're going to be led by universities, they'd be very interested in understanding that up front so that they can prepare now to be able to submit their applications. So hopefully I categorized that pretty well for the group, and thanks for the opportunity.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. So we are a couple minutes over 3:30 Eastern. I apologize. There's a lot of good information, a lot of good discussion. There was a good question in the chat from Zoe about reducing risk and the intersection with risk and resilience. People I was gonna just bring that to people's attention. If you want to respond, please do. We'll capture it as well, the comment. So I am going to sort of close us out now. I do want to say that this is part of a regular webinar series that we have with FHWA in the odd months. So January, March, we have a webinar focused on transportation performance management in general. And then the even months, February, April, etc., we have one mostly on asset management, focused primarily on asset management. So our next webinar is actually on February 16th. It's the third Wednesday of the month from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the same thing in the odd months with the TPM. This one got changed because of TRB. We just wanted to have some time away from TRB to be able to get it organized and everything. So I'm going to ask Kiana, do we know what the topic of our February meeting, our February webinar on TAM is yet?
I believe Kiana had to leave.
Oh, okay. Anyways,
but folks can look on the TAM portal or the TPM portal.
Yeah, so go to tam-portal.com or tpm-portal.com. If you want to access all of them, you can go to transportationmanagement.us. That will get you to all of our portals that have been talked about within the chat today. So again, thank you for attending today. Thanks to our friends over at the Committee on Transportation System Security and Resilience for joining and partnering with us on this webinar. Thanks to everybody from FHWA who was able to attend and kind of listen to the states and the locals about what some of their needs are and everything. I think it was a great opportunity to kind of hear what they have to say. We will have a recording of this webinar in some part or some aspect available on the TPM portal. We had the breakouts, that makes it a little more challenging, but we'll figure that out. And if you have any other ideas for other webinars on the TPM, the performance management topic, please let us know. We'd love to hear about them. My email is mhardy@ashto.org. Thank you very much for attending. I hope it was good. If you liked it, let me know. I'm just curious how the different formats, we're trying different things to get some interaction discussion going. So with that, thanks. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time. Bye.